Hello, everyone. Welcome here in San Francisco and welcome in Shanghai. Our colleagues in Shanghai got up really early. It's 10 a.m. and here in San Francisco it's 7 p.m. in the evening. It's such a pleasure to have you all here tonight during SF Design Week. We came together today to celebrate the Museum für Gestaltung's 150th anniversary. And as part of that celebration, I'm Pascal, as you can see in this picture. I've led this collaboration from part of Swissnex together with the Museum für Gestaltung. And for those of you who don't know the museum yet, I would like to briefly bring you up to speed. The Museum für Gestaltung looks like this. As you can see in 3 different pictures, there are 3 different locations. One on the left is the main collection building. The one in the middle is part of the Toni Areal, which is the campus of the Zurich University of the Arts. And the one on the right is the Corbusier Pavilion, also in Zurich. And the Museum für Gestaltung not only is a museum, but also does research and issues their own publication as part of the Zurich University of the Arts, and is, as I mentioned before, celebrating a big year. And here you can see an insight into the Swiss design collection. So they have a new exhibition with Swiss graphics and arts and craft and visual communication and much more, textiles, as you can see. 2,500 objects are on display. And the big exhibition will open in August 2025. And overall, the collection of the Museum für Gestaltung spans over 500,000 objects. So it's the biggest collection in Switzerland, and it's of international importance, really. But the collection is not only in physical space, it goes beyond that. They have the largest digital collection with the e-museum. And you can all access and visit the e-museum under emuseum.ch. So with that initiative of collecting, I think it's 125,000 objects digitally, it's really anyone from a curator, collector, artist, or anyone who's interested can access it anytime, which is quite revolutionary. And today, we come together as the museum wanted to not only celebrate their collection digitally and in physically, but also because they wanted to connect more globally with what they're doing. And this global project, was initiated by Sophie Grossmann, that you can see there. She came here to San Francisco a couple of years ago and had the idea to task 6 different artists from 6 different locations around the globe with reinterpreting a piece of the permanent collection. And here today we have Asma, Kazmi, and Jill Miller, the US artists, who are going to show us the reimagination of the electronic memory. And in China, it's going to be Yude Li, who's going to show his reinterpretation of the Viola da Gamba. So both objects connect through sound and what it means to collect sound. And yeah, the sound memory title already gave that away, but we're gonna hear more about that afterwards. Because yeah, before we dive into one of this big topic, I wanted to give it over to Sissy Sun, who's my counterpart in Shanghai, and she's going to present what Swissnex is and how our mission ties to this global project that tasks several artists, also in India, Brazil, and Japan, with reimagining a piece of the permanent Museum für Gestaltung Zurich collection. So Sissy, over to you.
Thank you, Pascal. Good morning and good evening to all our guests in San Francisco. It is my great pleasure here to welcome all of you to our very special event today. It's a collaboration between Swissnex in China, Swissnex in San Francisco, and Museum für Gestaltung. We are honored to bring together the creative minds, innovators, and visionaries from across continents and disciplines. For those of you who may be new to Swissnex, please allow me to briefly introduce who we are. Swissnex is Switzerland's global network dedicated to connecting Switzerland and the world in the areas of education, research, innovation, and the arts. We act as a platform for exchange and collaboration, where scientists, entrepreneurs, innovators, and educators can meet and shape their ideas together across borders. The Swissnex network spans the globe with main hubs in San Francisco, Boston, New York, Brazil, India, China, and Japan. And we also have additional science and technology offices at Swiss embassies around the world. Each location operates within its local ecosystem, building bridges between Switzerland and the host country. While our work is locally grounded, we are globally connected. The strength of Swissnex lies in our ability to bring together diverse voices and disciplines to tackle shared challenges and seize new opportunities through events, joint projects, and academic partnerships. Next slide, please. So at the heart of Swissnex is a clear mission to support the international engagement of Swiss higher education, research, and innovation. We enable the free flow of knowledge, idea, and talent by fostering long-term, trust-based partnerships. So for Swissnex in China, we are founded in 2008 in Shanghai, and we are proud to serve as a hub for meaningful exchange between Switzerland and China. We work closely with universities, startups, cultural institutions, government, and industry to foster collaborations in areas ranging from digital innovation to sustainability and to art and design. So today's event is a perfect reflection of that vision by joining hands with our colleagues in San Francisco and the Museum für Gestaltung. We are exploring how design innovation can spark dialogues across cultures and how we can learn from each other through the process. So we are very grateful here for all of you to be here and for contributing your time and your curiosity and creativity to this exchange. And now it is my pleasure to pass the floor to my colleague Pascal, who will lead us to dive into today's program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sissi. So I now have the pleasure to welcome our moderator of the night on stage. It's Karen Cheung. She's a curator based here in the SF Bay area, currently a curatorial associate in media arts at the SF MoMA. She's led many exciting exhibitions and commissions, for example, with Samson Young, Alexandra Pirici, and Raven Jacon. So give it up, please, for Karen. And she's going to introduce us to all the artists' works and the panel discussion.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning, China. I want to first thank the wonderful team at Swissnex in San Francisco and Swissnex in China for organizing this event, in particular the team members Pascal Speck, Lucas Hagen, and Sissi Yuan-Sun. I also want to give an early thanks to the panel speakers I'll be moderating, Asma Kazmi, Jill Miller, Colin, Siyuan, Chinnery, and Yude Lee, for sharing with us your work and engaging in this global dialogue about sound and memories. Sound fills our atmosphere and surrounds us. Sonic fragments are likely the first and last sensorial engagements we encounter daily. But when we find ourselves struggling to stay attuned to the increasingly multi-layered soundscape within our built, natural, and fictitious environments, we risk forgetting and losing certain fragments. The panel speakers' projects explore sounds are susceptible to disappearing. Asma, Jill, and Yude were commissioned to research and reimagine two objects in the Museum für Gestaltung Zürich's Design and Decorative Arts collections. The electronic memory model 81, a wire sound recorder manufactured in 1948 in the United States, and the viola da gamba, a bowed and fretted string instrument made by Joachim Kilta in 1694. The recorder was historically utilized by amateurs and the military to document sounds, while the viola was crafted to create and play music. But both were deprived of their oral properties and purposes when being housed and displayed at the museum. The exhibit, The Sounds of Old Beijing at the Sound Art Museum, co-founded by Colin, focuses on preserving sounds and traditions that for him will inevitably be lost in the course of urbanization. Through digital approaches to reinterpretation and storytelling, these projects enhance accessibility, engagement, and the cultural significance of sound memories worldwide. So I want to first introduce the first panel of presentation by Asma and Jill. And let me share with you their bio. Asma Kazmi is a new media artist and a professor of art at UC Berkeley. She creates art installations that blend physical and virtual spaces and objects. Using transgressive curatorial tactics, she combines visual and textual fragments from historical manuscripts, photographs, and archival material, and she mixes them with her own critical fabulation to tell stories about colonial and indigenous technologies, global flows of people and commodities, and interspecies entanglement. Jill Miller is a professor at UC Berkeley and an artist who works in new media, social practice, and video. She often collaborates with individuals and local communities in the form of public interventions, workshops, and participatory community projects. Her artworks are grounded in site research, and she excavates historical archives in order to create a framework for understanding present day and speculative futures. So without further ado, Jill and Asma, please join me.
Hello.
Hello.
So it's a pleasure for us to be here. We really enjoyed working on this project, and we felt like we scratched the surface of this particular object that we selected from the collection. So I think we'll start by showing, you have the clicker, we'll start by showing you about 1.5 minutes of the video. So it's about a 6-minute video. We don't have time for the whole thing, but you'll get a sense of what we created from the research that we did. So we can go ahead with that. Okay.
What is this? What is it? Wire? Wire recorder? What is it? What is it? What does Daddy do with the wire recorder? What is that?
Wire recorder?
Hello, Diane. That's a radio. That's a recorder. Say that. Recorder. You're talking here.
Yeah, so that is actually the end of the video. And in the next slide, we have, oh, go back one. Yeah, so if you look on the right, this is an image of the Webster Chicago Model 80. And then if you look on the left, this is actually a 3D model that we made of the one that we purchased from eBay. Yeah, actually we should have brought that. We could have just like set it out for y'all. Yeah, so we can keep going. So as you can see, the technology to scan and create a digital object is, it's in a place where it's almost photographic. And so wire recorders, oh, there's so much feedback. What's happening? Just hold it closer? Really? All right, everybody, loud and clear. Woo, okay. So just to give you a little bit of background about wire recorders, they were, they magnetically encoded data onto these very thin steel wires that were about the thickness of hair. So they were quite fragile. They were the precursor to magnetic tape recording. And they were, the wire recorder was originally invented in 1898. The model that we chose came out around 1947. And so it was the first portable wire recorder. So that was a bit different than what had existed earlier, where you might have to go to a studio to make a recording. So now, I mean, when we think of portable now, we also think of battery packs. So no, that wasn't the case. But it came in a small box with a handle, so that was portable. So this technology, wire recordings, they were used in many different applications. Aircraft black boxes, early satellites would transmit data that was kept on a wire recorder, espionage during World War II, and spy craft would secretly record conversations. And so magnetic recording is still very much alive in our lives now. As we know, when you use a credit card, your ATM card, your computer hard drives, audio and videotapes. Go to the next one. And so what was unique for us in learning about this specific object was that the portable wire recorder, which you see the closed version of it up here, that was used for home recordings. It definitely wasn't affordable, but it was kind of, those of us alive today remember having tape recorders. My cousins and I would make corny recordings of ourselves at family gatherings on our little tape recorder and play it back. That's what this tool was used for. So as a carrier device, the wire recorder itself produces a hum. It's imperfect. It records and it plays back in mono, so it's not stereo. It's optimized for a human voice. And so portable models like the Webster Chicago model were marketed to the public as a means of recording family moments. And here's a poster that we found online here. And so there's not a lot, there's not many ways to access wire recorders now that are functional. So there are some databases. For example, the American musician and musicologist Alan Lomax made several hundred recordings of folk music in the American South. And those things are, you can find those recordings. They're digitized. They're available readily. The psychologist David Boder traveled to Europe to record interviews with Holocaust survivors in 1946. He used a wire recorder. Again, very well preserved and accessible. The things that are harder to find are the family recordings, the things that in the moment might have been quite treasured, but then no one decided to digitize them. And so in our research, we were quite curious about the lesser known recordings. We cast a wide net and collected as many digitized wire recordings as we could find. And we consulted with a professional who specialized in audio restoration. And we learned that many recordings that he had restored were actual audio letters that were sent home from war, specifically the Korean War. And so servicemen would, like dictate a letter and send it back. And so essentially this recorder was ideal for home recordings. We found a lot of radio show archives, which were quite interesting, bootleg music, and then the man on the street ethnographic interviews, so, sir, what do you think of this? Ma'am, what do you think of this? We saw a lot of those. We also acquired a lot of boring conference lectures. One in particular was about like softening water. There's a lot of that we listened to. We were like, wow. And then, of course, another quite famous use for this technology was the Ghost Army in World War II. Probably many of you know about it, but this is an image of an inflatable tank, and this was used in World War II to win the war. So there were fake tanks that were inflatable, but there was also pre-recorded audio that was played so that the enemy might fly by and hear and see the tanks that looked like actual tanks from above, but also hear sounds that sounded like a lot of action. So that's to give you an idea of what we found.
Thanks for moving it forward. I'm going to talk about our project specifically and some of the theoretical framework, some of our conceptual ideas. So Jill talked a lot about the kinds of archives and the kinds of recordings that were accessible to us. And what we were really aware of in thinking about this project was that we were creating something that was of the past, but we were really interested as new media artists to link it to the present moment. We wanted to bring back to life a technology that has been forgotten, but it's clearly linked to the technologies of today. So one of the first things that we thought about was the quality of the sound that is produced by the wire recorder. We were not interested in cleaning up the sound. There are a lot of hisses and hums of the rotating gears, the spools of the machine. There's a lot of crackle in the sound, a lot of machine sounds and distortions, and we wanted to preserve those because they tell us something about the technology that was used to record those sounds. And then we were thinking about besides the distortions and the character of the sound itself, we were interested in focusing on mundane sounds and the aesthetic of the unexceptional, commonplace sounds, because we felt like those would create an authentic portrait of the past. So in the short clip that you heard, there was laughter, throat clearing, we have casual humming. So there are, these raw, unmediated sounds that very poetically reconstruct the experience of living in the 1940s and 50s. And I hope that as you listen to those sounds, you maybe got a little flavor of being in that time as you sit here in this room. Certainly for me, and I know for Jill too, as we were researching this project, I felt like I was living in the 40s. And that was actually a really wonderful experience. There are several layered tracks in the audio, and one track is just people breathing. So let's see, next slide. So to structure the work, we looked at a lot of early experimental filmmakers and avant-garde sound artists. Since these artists define how we experience media today, we wanted to move away from realist photographic reproductions to create something that was more expressive and layered, that's more open to interpretation, that's poetic. You know, and we in the images we wanted to capture the quality of the sound. So 35 millimeter film or 16 millimeter film had scratches and, you know, its own character. So we wanted to hold on to that. The images include private domestic spaces, places where people congregate. Towards the end, you see images of US military interventions. Yeah, and we also wanted to link the machine, the wire recorder, to the Industrial Revolution, to mining and extraction. So to this end, we have images of extraction sites. In there, you see here an image of a steel mill, and so yeah. So we wanted to show not only the technology but the other natural resources that are used to make those technologies. So yeah. So speaking more about new and old technologies. I spoke about the film, the 16 and 35 millimeter footage. So we're trying to use footage from the same period when the wire recordings were made, but the some of the old archived images are mixed with our own new media interventions. So you see, the image of the wire recorder, which is a laser scanned point cloud, a 3D model of the Webster Chicago wire recorder. We used AI to animate and manipulate old images. As Jill mentioned, the sounds come from various archives, but they can be played here because of digital technology. So we're merging old and new technologies within this project. You're moving back and forth, experiencing ancestor technologies and new technologies. And as new media artists, we're interested in that. We're interested in thinking about how culture is remembered and preserved through technology. I think that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
So before we move to the next presenter, I'm gonna introduce Colin. And I don't know if we have a feed of maybe in a bit. But I'll let me share Colin's biography in the meantime. Colin Siyuan Chinnery is co-founder of Sound Art Museum in Beijing, focusing on sound since 2017. Chinnery started creating sound art, music, and museological projects and explored the disappearing sounds of Beijing. In 2020, together with Hongfeng, Chinnery started setting up Sound Art Museum, the world's first institution focusing entirely on sound. The museum opened to the public in May of 2023. So I'll welcome Colin and his presentation. Shanghai.
Thank you very much. It's really rich here. Thank you for Swissnex for inviting me. It's really nice to be in communication, albeit online, with friends in San Francisco. I started my first ever project working with sound was when I was actually working at the British Council, which is a kind of sister cousin organization of Swissnex, I guess, in kind. And the project was called Sound and the City. It was a pun of Sex and the City, which is very popular at the time. And the idea was really to use sound to explore the city of Beijing. What we did was we invited experimental musicians from the UK to visit Beijing and to explore the soundscape of Beijing and to use those experiences to create sound works in the city. So they're not allowed to do works gallery or concert halls that had to be back into the city. And one of the musicians that we invited was Peter Kuzak. Peter Kuzak is an experimental musician and field recorder. He's from the UK, but now based in Berlin. And he has a project called Your Favorite Sound. He's been doing this since 1998. And what he does is goes all around the world. And in each city or each locale he visits, he asks the local population, very simple question, what is your favorite sound and why? Now, the question is very, very simple, but what it does is that it actually opens up lots of dialogue about what people's preferences are and people's relationship to sound in all kinds of places, in all kinds of different cultural contexts. And so in 2005, we invited Peter to be part of this project, Soundless City, in Beijing. And what we did was that we invited him to be on a radio show. It was a Beijing radio station, and he asked this question to the listeners of Beijing. And there was all kinds of answers. The answers were eclectic and unexpected and opened up a lot of debate. And what was very unexpected about it was that the media, the general media, not music or arts or cultural media, but actually the general media, was really excited about this project because it opened up so many conversations about everyday life. So I'll give an example of a couple of sounds. I hope you can hear these sounds in San Francisco. I'm afraid we couldn't hear your sounds from San Francisco just now, unfortunately. So let's hear this Beijing taximeter, which was one of the favorite sounds of Beijing, a Beijing taximeter. Well, actually, we can't hear Kira. Okay, I have older members of the audience, people my age, who are laughing right now. To me. So what you heard just now were actually the sound of pigeon whistles. That was another one of the favorite sounds. And pigeon whistles is probably the most iconic sound of Beijing. And for people who don't know, I think is almost everyone, what pigeon whistles are, is that people in Beijing, when they kept pigeons, they also actually made very intricate whistles that they attached onto the pigeons' backs on the tail feathers, so that way they flew through the air. The whistles would create the sounds, and there's different whistles be attached to different pigeons, and they create a kind of chord, kind of low sounds and high sounds. So this is obviously a very iconic sound of Beijing. But then not at the same time, the taximeter was an absolutely mundane, everyday sound of Beijing. And we got all these different answers and from listeners to the radio program, and it sparked debate about why are the big missiles are so beautiful, sound is so specific to Beijing. Why can't we hear it anymore? Why has this sound disappeared? And the sound of the taximeter was similarly, it was every day, but like, why did we notice it? It's actually really fun. It's a fun sound, but why don't we notice it? So this was actually opening a conversation about our relationship to everyday sound. And what happened was that this was a project in 2005, and in 2013, the second time I actually worked with sound was in this courtyard. The courtyard you can see here is called the Shijia Wuzhong Museum. Wuzhong means alleyway, so it's the Shijia Alleyway Museum. And they were going to do a museum on Beijing customs, Beijing traditional alleyways, or Beijing traditional culture. And so because I did Sound the City and I collected through the arts and through the musicians lots of traditional sounds of Beijing, I suggested that, well, why don't they do something with traditional Beijing sound? And so they asked me to do something like that. Have this slide. And what I did, so what I did was I thought of, well, actually, this is an opportunity to explore memory. And what is the relationship? I was thinking, well, what's the relationship to traditional culture and contemporary life? And the answer was really, while we're trying to explore, was like, our memories are part of contemporary life. So you have somebody elderly in their 80s or 90s, and you approach them, and you don't think of them as being a part of contemporary culture, contemporary life. But there are their memories and their experiences as a part of contemporary life. Can we think of it as contemporary? And I thought, well, actually, this is a really interesting question to explore. And the only way I could think of exploring it is through sound. And the reason why I did this was because I was listening as I was exploring this project, as going through the recordings from the 2005 project. This was 8 years later. And when I heard that taxi meter sound, I experienced a kind of traveling back in time. It's like when you smell a particular aroma and it takes you back to your childhood. You're back in your childhood bedroom, or you're with an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. You really feel that memory. It's not just a memory; it's actually an embodied memory. That's what I got when I heard that taxi meter sound, because the sound had gone, but I had heard it so many times. It was attached to my physical experiences at the time. So I thought, if I could recreate sounds of the past, maybe different sounds could trigger these emotional memories of different people, and you'd have a different kind of history, a very personal, experienced, embodied history, rather than a public or a subject or objective history. And of course, this is not really possible to achieve, but I thought it was something interesting to explore. So I started recording with the sounds of Beijing that people now, or people then, could remember. And that was the sounds of traditional Beijing of the 1930s. And that included lots of street hawking, as we can see here, recording some traditional street hawkers, which ended in the 1950s. So these are all past cultures, but some elderly people were still alive back then who actually did street hawking as they sold their wares at the streets. So that was part of that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I created this project in museum, very small, interactive touchscreen. And street hawking then was, Beijing street hawking is one of the most famous things about Beijing. It's extremely famous. It's performed on TV, it's in variety shows, all that. So I thought this is like old hat. It's been done many times. But I actually realized once I presented this project, I actually noticed them before. It was not treated as something serious or cultural. It was treated as something put. And therefore nobody recorded it seriously or systematically traced its history or tried to create some sort of projects with it. So this is the first time anyone had actually created a project using Beijing street hawking. And therefore, again, a little bit like Sound the City, created a lot of resonance with ordinary people in Beijing, not a part of the cultural sphere. Next slide, please. So again, many years down the road, I was planning the Sound Art Museum with my partner Hong Feng, and of course, this was an opportunity to really see, on a larger scale, how we can work with sound and memory, and how to work with public on a larger scale. So, the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we continued recording these street hopping traditions. We expanded the scope of what we're doing with Beijing sound. So this was the last street hopper in Beijing, the last living street hawker in Beijing. So we spent 3 years recording him until he passed away in 2023 at the age of 98. Next slide. So then we, after 3.5 years of working during the pandemic, we opened the Sound Art Museum in Beijing. That's the main entrance. Next slide, please. And this is the exhibition hall introducing the sounds of Beijing, called the Sounds of Old Beijing. Actually, it was really nice seeing the wide reporter, Webster, Chicago wide reporter, because we actually have exactly the same model on display in our museum, in our in our science section, or how we receive sound. So this really expands on what we're doing with that tiny little museum room in the Gestaltung Museum, by systematically reporting like basically every aspect of traditional Beijing sound. And we created this soundscape using a Mayer sound system, which is, I think, based in San Francisco. Mayer sound. So using a Mayer sound system, which is really flexible and can create this wonderful soundscape, a story, a narrative, all of the four seasons of Beijing and what all the different sounds are. And it's definitely our most popular exhibit in our museum. Next. And the other project that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation was working with Peter Cusack on his Your Favorite Sound. So we used the museum to actually expand this. And this is the room that we're using, which is has the title of Our Sounds. And the project that we present in Our Sounds, which means our sounds, the people's sounds, is Your Favorite Sound, working with Peter Cusack. And so we are using social media to then constantly ask the public what their favorite sounds are. And my team goes out and records those sounds and makes short videos of them. And then those sounds from the public that have part of our museum's exhibit. So this room is the last room of our museum. And then the old sounds of old Beijing is the first room. So that's the sounds of traditional Beijing. You start with that, and then you go through other rooms like sounds of nature and music and language and science, and then you end up with sounds of contemporary Beijing, the Beijing Nat. So that's two ways we're working with sound and memory. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colin. I'm going to introduce our last presentation speaker, Yude Lee. Yude is a designer and new media artist, graduated from Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts. His practice centers on digital art, with a particular focus on the perceptual transformation and narrative possibilities enabled by digital media. Through techniques such as point cloud modeling and real-time image generation, he transforms abstract elements such as sound, memory, and cultural imagery into dynamic sensorial visual experiences. His work merges technology with emotion, opening up a narrative space within digital art that is both intimate and poetic. Thank you, Yude.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good evening in San Francisco. My name is Yude Lee, and I'm 22 years. I'm from Guangzhou, China, and I'm a designer and a new media artist. I just finished my study in Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts. And today I want to talk about my project. It's named The Shape of Echoes. It's about how to transform abstract memories into visible shapes and through digital media. I use point cloud technology to do this, and we can show the next page. The project used 4 melodies played on Volta Gamba, and it's named Lago, Vivace, Endcave, and Alago. Each melody has its own rhythm and motion. I see this changed and to use it to grip my visuals. And I made a 3D model of the Volta Gamba and using photos from our creator, Sophie. And this model is the base of my project. And as the music played, the model changed into 3 objects that can present Chinese culture. And first, the instrument changed into a bass from the Hongwu period. And these shapes are similar as are both levels and curved. But they are not just similar on the outside. And both objects reflect how different culture and shape meaning through form. Yeah, next, please. And next, I show a change based on a record bone script. This instrument has a flower and flying comics. They remind me of the earliest Chinese characters. It has shaped line and are often in text rows. And so I combine a pattern on the instrument and orbital bone script in my visual change. Okay, and the final transformation is by Tang Dynasty lady figurines. And as we can see, on top of the instrument, there is a small human figure. And it reminds me of these figures. They are symbols of Chinese culture and showing history style through shape. Both of the head of instrument and the Tang figures are not just as decoration, and they represent culture, but it's through the form, and that's why I choose to connect them in my work. Yeah, and in my project, these things don't just appear one after another, and they mix and change slowly, and like a memory wolf. And the music control the rhythm and the visual change. I combine Western instrument and Chinese culture object and with digital particles in the same place. And because I hope to show how different culture and memory can connect and influence each other and create something new together. And to me, memory is not something frozen, and it's move and it grow with time. So in my project, each change is like an echo. It's not just how memory change over time, and the shade may change, but the feeling will stay forever. And thank you.
Thank you, all the presenters, for your wonderful presentations and sharing your projects with us. I want to move on to a panel discussion. I have a few questions prepared and wanted to dive a little bit deeper about your process of creating these projects and also museum practices. So I have a first question because the first conversation I had with Sophie about this commissioning project with Jill, Asma, and Yude, one of the interesting things I found out is that this commission project is essentially an object-centered project. You're taking these two collection works as a point of departure, and yet from the very beginning, you've been completely detached from this physical object in the museum's collection.
So I wanted to hear a little bit more from Jill, Asma, and Yude. How have your research process, materials and documentations that you were able to access and reference shaped your approaches to access and reinterpretation of these collection works?
Should I start? Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And, it makes me think about museums. And, one of the nature of the museum is such that even the things that we feel are accessible are behind glass, or they're, you can't touch them. And so, so even though we had this physical distance from the museum, we were working with an object, luckily, that we could acquire, as Jill mentioned, from eBay, so that we could have this intimate interaction with the machine, which is a portable device, but it weighs around like 20 pounds, so it's heavy, and so luckily we were able to acquire the object and feel the materiality and the wire itself, but even if we had been in Zurich, I think we still would have just seen the object. So I think that was, we wanted to support that and acquire the object and go from there. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about what kind of archival materials were provided in your research? Yeah.
Do you mean the kinds of materials we found, or?
Both we found and what maybe Sophie and the museum provided. Yeah.
Well, the museum, I mean, we use their incredible database actually to decide which object we wanted to explore. We also checked to make sure that we could get our hands on one, though, because I think for us, it felt important that we could find, that we would find something local that also existed there and explore it. We're both we have a sculpture connection, and so we needed the physical object. So the museum gave us a picture of it, and they have a whole collection of actual wire recorders that someone donated, and they, to the best of my knowledge, they'd never actually used any of them for a show, which was really exciting too. So we were kind of playing with something that the museum had in storage, and there's not a lot known about it because the wire is so fragile that people generally, don't digitize them.
Yeah, we, in the art practice department at UC Berkeley, we have the Anthropology Museum, which has a huge collection of ethnographic field recordings on the wire recorder. And because they're so fragile, none of them have been digitized. And, they didn't even give us access to their collection to just photograph the the materials. So it's a challenging technology for that reason.
Yeah, we think about, the physical objects as materiality, but also sound recordings as materiality and their fragility as well. Yeah. I want to hear a little bit about Yude's process as well, because I learned from Sophie that you selected viola originally because of you were drawn to the aesthetic form of the viola, rather than knowing more about its musicality from the beginning. So I want to hear more about your experience with researching the object.
好，所以这个问题是给玉德的，就是在你的创作当中，你提到了中提琴，那么它带给你的创作怎么样的一些灵感？
所以就是 Sophie 她在提供给我的就是这个中提琴 v i o l a 跟把它的图片还有它对的4个章节的音频，就其实我会在获取到这些信息之后，我会把它带入到可能我的生活当中。就首先它的旋律非常的优美缓慢，然后呢我会在我的日常去频繁的去听它，比如说可能我跑步的时候会听，我散步的时候会听，然后在这些过程当中，它声音会与我在当下的日常生活产生一些交织，这种交织会给我提供一些视觉上和创作上的灵感。
Right. So firstly, I've got the picture and the video of the viola da gamba, and after I got the materials from Sophie, I try to use it in my daily life. For example, when I do a lot of things, when I exercise, I will listen to the video and the audio materials. And during this process, these sounds gradually connect with my mundane routines. And from these movements, I get my inspiration and transform these inspirations into visual and arty works. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that something originated from the visual form, yet hearing the 4 movements and melodies being played evoked such emotions that it became such a strong connection to personal memory that eventually became the genesis of your project. Okay, I wanted to also now ask a question regarding sound collecting, and I want to tie this with Colin's work as well, because I know the Sound Art Museum collects sounds and objects. Colin also mentioned that in the collection of the museum is also a wire recorder that Asma and Jill has used for their project. So I wanted to tie both, the work of Colin, also Jill and Asma's missing objects library, because one is a physical space and museum, one is a virtual space. And I want to ask both of you all, how do you decide what to collect and preserve? And what is the role of curators, artists, and the public in the selection process? I don't know if maybe, Colin, do you want to go first? Yeah.
Cool. Well, I started Technosound before I had any idea that we would open a museum together. So it's really project-based, because I'm an artist and curator by practice, and so it was really the idea of following up on an idea and how to complete that idea. And another way to do that was collecting sounds. And that's how it started. And so once we had the museum, a museum had this collection to draw from. It's not a large collection. We're not based on an archive. So we're not, let's say, we have a huge archive, like a company or an institution has a huge archive that goes back decades, and we draw upon that to do our institution. We're primarily, we create exhibitions from sound, whether it be sounds of nature or language or musicality, whatever. However, we collected these sounds from old Beijing because they was doing it, and it's a huge bright spot in the cultural memory or cultural, let's say, legacy of a city, which has a very, very large sonic tradition in its traditional culture, and for some reason it's not being recorded systematically. So it's very, very strange that this half Westerner that I am was doing this, and actually a lot of people online in China was commenting on this. How come this non-Chinese person is collecting Chinese sounds? None of it was with any enmity towards me whatsoever. It was like saying, come on, why aren't we doing this? And it's nothing to do with like you're Chinese or not. It's because sound is very, very often neglected. It's overlooked or overlooked. Our whole language is visually oriented. So it's really overlooked by the cultural sphere because we have can't close our ears. I'm going slightly off track here about coming back. We can't close our ears like we can close our eyes. It means that we listen to sound like every second of every day, whether we want to or not. It means that we have a very, very specific filter to filter out, all unnecessary sounds. And that's not only how we deal with everyday life to keep sane, and also it's how that filters out into how we treat culture as well. We filter all extraneous sounds out, and we realize that a lot of those extraneous sounds are actually really interesting sounds. And of course the past few decades, artists and musicians have been realizing this and been bringing these extraneous or superfluous sounds back into the fold and doing things with them. And really with not only the Beijing recording sounds of Beijing, but the other project that I mentioned today was the Your Favorite Sound is really about that. So that is really the thread by which we record these sounds as a project rather than creating a giant archive. So, we draw on other people's giant archives. So, for example, going back to the wire recorder, we're working with the China Database for Traditional Music, which is the biggest traditional music database in China. And they have a huge collection of old vinyls and wire recordings. So they have really, really interesting wire recordings if you're interested, some sort of future projects. So we can drag on those because they have a giant archive. But for our purposes, we record sounds according to needs of our projects.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that Missing Objects Library, this is another project that Asma and I have collaborated on. We also, I would say, worked out of necessity because we work together, we teach together, we make art together, and we were finding that the mainstream databases where you could buy a 3D model, for example, if you're going to make a video game, if you're a kid making a video game, or if you're making an architectural model or something, you might go to one of these storefronts and buy a 3D model or get a free one. We were finding that there were communities that we were a part of that weren't being represented. So when we created Missing Objects Library, we did it to give a space and a voice to people and communities who weren't being represented in the mainstream. So I would say it was also a sort of necessity.
Yeah, and we, so it's a digital database, and we worked with experts, students and our colleagues to go through these databases and identify the erasures. And then we taught a class where all of our students, graduate students, created these cabinets of missing items. So the curation was a collective process. Yeah.
Thank you. Speaking of the curation of selected sounds and objects you work with, throughout the presentation, everyone has in ways mentioned these various different kinds of sound-based memories that you've chosen to preserve and reinterpret. Thinking about Jill and Asma, you spoke a little bit, at least mentioned to me your thought on universal sounds or commonplace sounds that you sort of embrace their distortions now through the wire recorder. And for Colin, sounds that are specific to a locale, Beijing. And for Yude, sounds that music and sound that eventually became tied really closely to your personal memories. All of these projects also made me think about this idea of acousmatic sounds, sounds that are detached from their physical source in time and place and can be reproduced. And I wonder, what are your thoughts and why have you really focused on these specific types of sound-based memories in your projects?
Yeah, so, I feel like experiences with sound, and I think we've all touched upon this, are very immersive. They are sort of liminal portals or create these, contrapuntal, in Edward Said's terms, moments where we can simultaneously be in more than one place at a time. So, that's been my sort of interest in working with sound and experiencing these different eras and moments, and feeling like I'm in a room with a father teaching his young daughter to learn how to read. So they've been really sort of. It's felt like time travel in a way, and that feels really valuable.
Yeah, I would say our sounds are we didn't want a specific voice to dominate the audio track of our work, except there's two different children that appear, and there is a father teaching his daughter how to read, and at one point it becomes a really interesting meta experience where he says, "Diane, what are you holding?" "That's a magnetic recorder," and you're kind of listening to the sound and going, okay, they're talking about the thing she's holding, and this is this object. And of course, this would have been done in the 40s or 50s. So then you think about, where is Diane today? And has Diane ever heard this? Because she was a child when it was recorded. There's another child who got her hands on the recorder, and she starts talking into it, and it's also in the beginning of the piece. But besides that,
during a party, I think the parents are partying.
Yeah,
while this is happening.
Yeah,
and you can hear them.
Yeah, in the background, then you hear this like little girl, and actually that was really wonderful for us to think like, oh, this little girl just like took this opportunity to take the technology into her own hands, So besides that, we were very sensitive to thinking about where this piece would exist. So it'll be in a museum in Switzerland, and so we certainly didn't want just English language to dominate it, but we also are aware that the databases that we have access to are mostly in English. So there was a bit of us being aware of where the piece would live, but also we liked the idea of having the children be the only voices that were clear in the work. We thought that was kind of liberating and beautiful.
I love that. In ways, this beautifully ties into what Colin talked about, sound being the conduit to be able to tie past and contemporary life together, and of course the child's voice and their curiosity and the parental relationship that transcends time always. So maybe that's a good segue. Maybe Colin, if you can share more about your thoughts.
Actually, this year we're starting a project to record children's artwork. Children come to all times of the museum with their parents a lot, and we're putting together a little booth at the end of the museum exhibition route, and it's a little booth where children can leave a message for themselves in the future. So this is exactly what I think we're talking about when with a child, like you wondering where she is now from the 40s or 50s and whether she's heard this. It's very unlikely that she has. It's been in an archive. But that's what we're trying to do is that, well, the idea is that there's going to be a screen and you agree for your voice to be recorded, be part of our archive so that you can access it in the future. I mean, the person you left your voice, or anybody else. But the idea is it's actually a memory for the future. So it's a message that you leave for your future. And what this really is about is not, we hope, not just a gimmick, is that we now take recording for granted. So, it's everywhere. It's part of everyday life. You carry your phone with you and you can take a mobile or you can take a video and it's all got sound. And so sound is again, we can record sound, but now it's so prevalent that we just it's not a thing anymore. And therefore we want to make it a thing again. And we want people to be, for children to know this and for the parents to know this, that we are actually creating memories when we record things and to activate that as, to think about it when they're doing it. Rather than just that you record something, to think about what would you like to leave, what kind of message would you like to leave yourself in the future, or your parents in the future, or whatever. And I think it's about the very core of why the magic, let's say. We're trying to we can't reignite the magic, but the magic was there at the beginning of the technology when it first appeared. And we want a little bit spark of that magic again when people, or the mystery of it, when people leave the message for themselves in the future.
Well, speaking of magic, I feel like that's Yude's experience when listening again to the four movements and melodies of the viola da gamba. And also, your work is about the future. It is a speculative future of this instrument that's a hybrid of both, traditional Chinese cultural motifs and became this, hybrid new object that doesn't exist. So can you also, share more about what your thoughts are on the choice of working with this this sound-based memory that's really tied to your own personal memory?
好，就是首先在最开始接触这样一个项目的时候 ，Sophie 她是给了我4段音频关于这个viola da gamba的。那对于我而言，我的整一个创作历程都是在广州完成的，但是这一件文物以及它所附带的音频，其实他们实际上都在瑞士，都在苏黎世。那我自己本身在没有见到这个实物的情况下，我如何通过远程的一些信息来让我去跟这一件文物、跟这些音频产生某种联系？这个是我在去做这个创作的时候，我首先去思考的问题。那我的一个想法就是，既然我没有办法在创作的时候接触到实物，那我就让我的想象力先行。我去想象这些音频，它在我生活当中，它会发生的一些实际上的一些效果。因为其实声音这个东西，在我看来，它是很有私密性的。就是哪怕一个公共音频在地铁站上播放，或者在公交车上播放，它映射到不同人的这个脑海当中，它会去激起一些不同的回忆。所以可能在我看来，我的这个首要的任务就是，我需要对这一些音频产生一个对于我而言很私密性的回忆跟感受，然后我再去依附这些感受，在我的这个视觉创作上面去把它给体现出来。就像4个音频，然后我会去有意识、下意识的在我的生活当中去 反复的去聆听它。可能在我空闲的时候，我会去听一听，然后可能在我放空的时候，我也会去听一听。久而久之，它会形成一种回忆，就是我在创作的时候，我会跟这一段声音，它就并非是一段可能单纯的一个很远处或者说很陌生的声音，它其实融入到了我的日常生活当中，那我就可以对它去进行一些可能在我看来更加私密性或者说主观的创作。这个就是我去设计这个作品的时候的一些创作历程，包括我是如何去感受 Sophie 她发给我的这些声音的。然后可能回到这个中国文物上面，因为我自己本身我在学习设计、学习艺术的生涯当中，我对中国的一些文物很感兴趣。那我就会想说，既然声音它已经对我产生了联系，那我是否能把它跟我之前所了解的、所感兴趣的一些中国文物，在视觉上面同时去产生联系，就像是这个青头上的小人变成了这个唐代的人釉，然后呢，青纹上的花纹去变成了甲骨文，就是这些视觉上它就更加能够去配合着我的这些 Sophie 发给我的声音去做整体上这个作品的创作。这个就是我去创作这个作品的时候，可能我的一些感想。
So at the very beginning, Sophie has sent me first audio clips. For me, I finished all my creation in Guangzhou, China, which means however, the artifact is located in Switzerland, which means I cannot really see these artifacts or access it myself personally. So the first thing comes to my mind is how I can create connections with these artifacts. And it comes to me that since I cannot really access the artifact myself, I can use imagination. So I started to imagine what effect these audio will have in my life. Well, audios or sound, they can evoke different feelings or memories. So I decided to blend these audios into my daily life. That means I started to create memories associated with these audios. And then I decided to reflect my feelings and memories into my art creation. In my daily life, I will listen to these audios whenever possible. And during this process, gradually some kind of memories and feelings formed, and they become part of my life. And also, this is the process of my creation. Now let's go back to the topic of Chinese cultural artifacts. Back when during my study, I was really interested in Chinese traditional culture and cultural relics. And so I started to think about what kind of a connection can be built between the sounds and the Chinese cultural relics. I noticed that the small human figures on the viola da gamba is very similar to the Tang Dynasty female figurine. And that's how I gradually learned my creation thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's a lovely way to sort of sum up this panel and all of our speakers' project, this cross-cultural connection and global dialogue we have. I'll pass it back to Pascal, I think, if we have time for audience questions or not. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm very interested in the wire recording media and the fragility of it. Is it that you can't handle it? Can it be put on the machine? Can you go a little bit more depth into how you might get access to those sounds?
Yeah, that's a great question. We realized it was fragile when we received it in the mail, and we noticed that the actual machine came with instructions for how to tie the knot correctly when the thread broke. So it's not a contemporary issue. This is just something to do with how thin the wire is. Even though it's steel, it's very thin. And I won't go like too much into the wire recorder history, but certain recorders, and I do have to send it to you because it's from Switzerland. I need to send this to Sophie, actually. It's something I found. But there was a type of recorder that where part of the mechanics would move up and down to prevent it from actually tangling on itself. And so early recorders had placed the different pieces like on opposite ends of the machine, then they tried them next to each other. There's a whole history there of how they tried to keep the wire from breaking, but it's just inevitable, and then it's part of the recording then, like that. If you drop a magnetic tape, when we use tapes, cassette tapes, you could drop it and then you could damage it and it would affect the sound. It's similar to that.
Yeah, so of course if you have to tie the knot, you're losing information, but also if it gets unraveled, there's several miles of wire on those spools. So just imagine if that becomes tangled, there's no way to spool it back correctly. So.
I think we have time for one more question, maybe from the audience in China.
All right. Question for Colin. So, your museum, there are some artists, I think, China who practice in sound, like artists here, and do you host sometimes temporary exhibitions?
Yes, we do have a contemporary part of the museum, and we do commissions. We commission artists to do new projects, especially young artists. Well, there's conceptual ideas working with sound in contemporary ways. So it's like, how do you understand sound art as a phrase in the English language, not in the Chinese language, but in the English language. And we've had this project called Feedback. I'm working with a scholar for sound art based in Hangzhou called Wang Jing. And together we're creating a history, we're looking at the history of sound art or rather the sound creation in contemporary Chinese art history. So it's a very short history from the 1980s until the present. But retracing that is actually really tough because sound art is not something that is really thought about by contemporary artists in China. So they may have worked on sound or on works. They have made works entirely consisting of sound, like a conceptual work of sound, but they don't think of it as a sound artwork. So it's a long process of searching. So instead of doing research and then do you want to make show, we're presenting the works that we find as we go along. So the exhibition is a long-term exhibition, and we actually show what we find, our research findings along the way. And at some point in the future, we'll probably get to a point where we really have found more or less, everything there is to be found. So we found the clean archival works that can't be shown, can't be recreated, and then we'll put together publication. So yeah, so it's commissions and there's feedback, and we also do group shows of contemporary artists working with sound in our other spaces and also outside of Beijing.
with respect to time, I think it's time to close tonight's event. I want to extend my sincere gratitude to you, Karen, for brilliantly moderating the event, and to you, Asma and Chill, for being here today and presenting your really incredible reimagination of the electronic memory and talking about it, about the whole process. And huge thanks, of course, go to the other side of the globe, to Shanghai, to you, Colin. Thank you so much for presenting your work, and yeah, it's been such a pleasure to get the insight into your museum. I can't wait to see it in person someday. And to you, Yude, for presenting your work and your process and how your imagination has shaped the results. And thank you to my dear colleagues from Swissnex in China. Thank you, Sissy, Sun, and the whole team. Yeah, it's been a huge pleasure working together with all of you. Yeah, thank you to the audience here in San Francisco and in Shanghai for coming. We now will transition into the networking part. You can still stick around and, of course, talk to our guests that are here in person. And I hope you will do the same in Shanghai. Yeah, with that, I wish you a lovely morning or evening here in San Francisco. Thank you so much for coming.